guy. I wish you were my son.
He's just kissing your ass to be polite.
Nah, I'm cool as shit and you're just jealous.
No, you are, dude. I might just start hanging out with you now.
Hell yeah.
Now, before we dive in, just a quick reminder. This video is for informational and entertainment purposes only, and should not be considered financial advice. Our full disclaimer is shown here and on our website. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of us reacting to TikToks. So, we have quite a few great TikToks today that are going to discuss, topics ranging from like the mortgage market to employment to, hey, how do I actually save up more money for my future? So, let's dive right into some great videos today and see what the buzz is all about with these creators. So this first creator is called Chris Cobb _chosen. Let's see what he has to say about banks.
In 60 seconds. So here we have John, and John sees his dream house, and it's $400,000, but the problem is John doesn't have any money. And that's when the bank comes to John and says, hey, we saw you want your dream house, and it's $400,000. We'll loan you the money, just pay us back over the next 30 years, plus a little interest. So John takes his $400,000, get his dream house, and 30 years later, he finally pays off his house, but he realized he paid over $1 million for his $400,000 house. And that's when he goes to the bank and he's like, why did you charge me over $600,000 in interest? And they said, well, John, we gave you $400,000 when you had nothing. We took all the risk. So if it wasn't for us, you'd probably still be written. But not only that, John, think about this. You remember that time you wanted a car? Well, who gave you $40,000 for it? Also, when you wanted to go to college, who gave you $60,000? John, I'm not saying we're a saint, but every time you needed money, who had your back? And that's how banks work. They take the risk and they loan all this money up front, and they charge a little bit of interest on the back end so they can afford to do this for everybody in the future. The banks get a bad rap because of the interest, but most of the stuff that we have in life, we wouldn't have it without them. So if you like this video, comment below what you want to see next. This is how banks work.
Just a few of the items here in this video. The first thing is he's 100% right. Most people can't afford go out there and just say, hey, here's $400,000 for a house. It's coming straight on my account. I would say most people out there would not have the ability to do that. That's why banks are so crucial for you to go out there and actually, get your assets. Now, the big thing is like most people say is like, hey, but why are they charging me interest? Like the interest is so crazy. Well, let's dive right into a few of those items. The first thing is usually, of course, money that banks get usually isn't completely free. So they themselves have to pay, a certain amount of interest themselves to actually get the money from the Fed, from the Fed. Usually it's right now, to my understanding, it's 4.25 to 4.5%. So that's the first piece they actually have to pay to actually acquire the money that they're going to be lending to you. Now, the next thing is a bank is a business just like anyone else. So they have to make money, of course. So the 1 to 2% usually they charge additional on top of the Fed funds rate. That's their profitability, if you want to say that. The other aspect is, hey, think about it this way. If they don't charge that interest, how are they supposed to continue to actually beat inflation in that regard too? The other aspect is, of course, inflation is usually, especially nowadays, it could be ranged between 5 to 10%. And, the only way to actually beat inflation is to have a guaranteed return on your investment. So in essence, when they lend you the money, it's their investment in you, hoping that, of course, you don't default on the loan. So that's what he meant by taking on the risk. It's not a guaranteed thing that when you lend money to someone, they're not going to lose their job, God forbid, and then have to get foreclosed on. And then in essence, the bank has to hold on to a property they initially didn't even want. What they really wanted was the guaranteed returns of you paying back your loan, and then of course you own the house after the 30 years. Now, this is some psychological as well. It doesn't mean that you have to pay the house in 30 years. I think that's something that we have embedded in our minds that like, hey, the mortgage is just like your rent, so you could just pay the basic minimum and that's pretty much it. Nowadays, I would be, I'm being transparent here. I would say I wouldn't even do that. I wouldn't just pay it over the 30 years because just like you saw in this scenario, the interest rate could be sometimes, 1.5 to 2 times the amount of the, of your property when you initially bought it. So what I would do in this case is you would actually, pay off even more every month. So instead of paying, let's say your monthly mortgage is $2,000, instead of paying $2,000 a month, pay $2,500, pay $3,000, pay whatever is in your means to pay if you're not going to be using that money for the long period of time, and then pay off your mortgage faster. That way, in the long run, instead of paying it in 30 years, maybe paying 15 years, 20 years, it will save you so much on interest that you'll be mind boggled, and of course you'll own your home faster and avoid the risk of, God forbid, being foreclosed on because you lose your job. So that's another aspect that I did want to talk to you about. And finally, just to end it as a bonus, the other reason why interest is so important and gains are so important, not just for the bank, but for your own investments, is because every year our dollar is decreasing and decreasing in value. So if you don't have any, gains on your money, you're essentially making your money worth less and less every year. And that's not something you want to do with your life. You want to make sure that your money is continuing to grow just so it can keep up with inflation. And in the long run, when you retire, you'll have enough money to live comfortably and be, and enjoy your life, of course. So let's move on to the next video now. So this content creator is John.T88, and he's going to be talking about, hey, that big number, 150K to 200K, is that really all it's crapped out to be?
Amount of money, it's dangerous. Now I know if you're out of college, you're looking at this range and you're like, oh wow, it's a lot. It's not. You get stuck in this range. In regular corporate America, cog in the wheel stuff, this is the max that you could get on your merit. This is the max. After this, it's about personality, likability, and networking. In my last post, Robert Sterling described the people that make this amount of money. He said the salary is good enough to have an expensive lifestyle, but not enough to feel successful. Most of the people in that range aren't managing anybody. Now, they could be happy, they could be satisfied with that, which is very possible. Managing people is a lot of work. But if you want that extra, if you're a little bitter, if you're a little like, oh man, I wish I had that extra fancy vacation, I wish I had that nicer car, I wish I did this, I wish I did that, you're not going to get it with that range. It's just not going to happen. What do you think the ideal number should be? This amount.
So let's dive right into what he's saying. So I'm going to completely agree. 150 to 200K is actually something, I believe, to my understanding, software engineers can actually start earning this right away. Usually when they come out of college, that's something that right away you can get 150 to 200K. However, for most people, including myself, this salary is only possible usually after 8 to 10 years. And this is you grinding and grinding and grinding. And just to be honest, like accounting nowadays, you probably start off at around 60 when you start off. And then after a couple of years, you'll probably be like an 80 to 90. And then once you become a manager, you're probably at like the 120 to 150 range. And then once you become a senior manager, then you're like at the 175 to 200 range. And once you make it to controller, that's when you start like at the roughly 200K-ish to 225. But you're stuck. Once you're a controller, you're pretty much, it's very difficult for you then to move on to like the VP of finance role, to move up to the, to the CFO role, because those roles are limited. As you go up the ranks, it becomes more and more difficult for you to actually make more money just because there's more limited roles out there, and those roles will go only to people, one, with the skill, but more than importantly, it's going to go to people who they like. And even if you don't have the best skills, as long as you're likable and you're able to preach your message and able to actually, get your, verbalize, your vision, that's the people that are going to be more likely to get those VP positions, to get those CFO positions. And, sometimes it happens where like, you're buddies with someone and they have an open position at a company and they'll hire you as their VP, their SVP, or even their chief officer. So I 100% agree with him where sometimes it's not about the skill, it's about who you know and just having the opportune time to join a company. And funny enough, a lot of people out there, just like he mentioned, this 150 to 200K range may seem enticing, but people who actually get to these kinds of verticals, they're actually making probably between $400 to $1 million a year. VPs, SVPs, all of these guys are making such big money that it'll make your head spin. And you're thinking that, 150 to 200K is a lot, when nowadays, if you're living like a metropolitan area like New York, California, this is nothing. You're barely covering ends, you're barely making ends meet. You're not going to be able to save for a house. And overall, it's going to be much more difficult for you to achieve the things you want to achieve, such as starting a family, buying a home, owning the things that you want to own. This salary is just not cutting it anymore. And nowadays, if you really want to be able to even afford anything, to be honest, especially in the high-end metropolitan areas, you're going to need closer to like $400,000 to $600,000 a year. And that's, for you to be able to afford a home, for you to be able to raise 2 to 3 kids. All of these items are crucial in order to even just to like barely meet the standards that back then with $80,000 or even $40,000 you could do. So definitely times have changed, and this kind of money may have seemed enticing back then, but it just has not kept up, with inflation and just how expensive things have gotten. So let's dive right into the next video. Hello everyone, my name is Anthony and I'm the host of the Log Sanctuary. I hope you've been enjoying our content so far, and if you have, please feel free to like and subscribe. Also, we have our website up here, and we also have some socials down here. And as always, leave your comments down below. So this next video is from FM Smith 319. Let's see what he has to say about, earning 20 bucks, which might have been a lot back then, but it's not much now, I would say.
Can't live comfortably on $20 an hour, you have to be overspending. We got to break this down very quickly to give people perspective into the Gen Z's lives. If you make $20 an hour, that is $40,000 a year. After taxes, that is $2,750. The average one-bedroom apartment and utility is going to run you $2,000. You cannot do that making $20 an hour, so you're going to have to rent with a roommate for about $1,200, and that's being conservative. $500 a month for groceries, which is less than $150 a week. $300 for a student loan payment, which is below average. $300 for a car payment, which is below average. $150 for car insurance, $150 for gas, $100 for personal care, $50 for a cell phone is $2,750. That is paycheck to paycheck, leaving you with nothing. Nothing for savings, investments, the big one, health insurance, because I'm assuming they're under 26 years old, and zero fun. Now, if they were to make $30 an hour, that's $60,000 a year. That's $3,900 after taxes. Maybe they decide to get their own place for $2,000 and everything else stays the same. They're left with $350 a month, which is essentially still paycheck to paycheck. This is the cost of living in America. If you kids can't live comfortably on $20...
So I completely agree with what he's saying. Nowadays, just to give you guys some context, the average rent now for a one-bedroom apartment here in the city, in New York City, is actually close to like $4,500. So what he's mentioning is actually the areas that are a little bit more affordable, which would be like your Brooklyns, your Queenses. And this is the more affordable option right here in New York City. So if you wanted to get like a 1 or 2 bedroom, you're probably going to be paying at least $2,000 a month. And that's the base minimum. And nowadays, of course, minimum wage is $15 a month, $15 an hour here in New York City. So that's barely cutting it. You're going to be earning like $2,400 gross, which, net, you're not going to be able to afford rent. So I completely agree with him where if you want to actually even be able to afford things, you're going to need roommates. You're going to need people to actually, share the expenses with you if you want to even be able to make ends meet. And, even nowadays, I would say earning closer to $40 or $50 an hour would be able to get you something that's a little bit more manageable where you can, cover all your expenses as well as be able to save some money in order to actually, have a chance and, investing in your property, investing in a property or even just doing regular investments like going out and buying stocks and things like that. So overall, I agree with him, and, the price, the salaries have just not kept up with these kinds of expenses. And overall, it's now taking 2 to 3 salaries just to be able to do the things, back then where you required just one salary and that's it. So hopefully everyone out there continues to grind and try to do your best to see if you can, up your salary either by getting, more education or getting a new skill set. This is going to be crucial because while you have the earning potential now is when you need to get out there and continue to earn more. Alrighty, let's move on to the next video. So this next video is from MPTU, and let's see what he has to say about living with your parents in your 20s.
with your parents? Yeah, man, I'm just trying to save some money, you know? It's hard out here. Couldn't be me, man. I gotta have my own place. Oh, where do you live? In one of those pre-built shacks they have in the parking lot of Home Depot. Oh, nice.
Hey, what are you boys up to? Is this your friend?
Hey, how you doing, sir?
Good. You're the one that lives on his own, right?
Yes, sir. We were just talking about that.
Yep, I had my own place when I was 16, but this guy, I guess he just likes having a free ride, huh?
Dad, stop.
This guy just can't get it together, can he?
Hey, some people just don't want to grow up, you know? Dude, you live in a fucking shack. Shut up.
And you think a young guy like him would be bringing home girls every night, but nope, none.
I don't bring any home because you creep them out every time.
Nah, they probably think I'm cute.
Oh my God, please go back inside.
I get bitches, okay? I get bitches.
Yo, your dad is the fucking man. No, he's not. Where is mom at?
I don't know. She's probably at Home Goods buying a bunch of shit we don't fucking need.
You gotta move out, bro. You wanna come work with me? No, dude, you're a fucking criminal.
Kids these days, they just don't want to work. When I was 25, I was working 80 hours a week.
I have a full-time job, and I can't afford anything still because your generation hoarded all the money and fucked up the entire economy.
Nah, it's your fault. It's all your fault.
Okay, fine. Can you please go back inside now?
Hey, this is my house, all right? I'll do whatever the hell I want whenever I get good and goddamn ready.
Hell yeah, dude. You're the man.
I like this guy. I wish you were my son.
He's just kissing your ass to be polite.
Nah, I'm cool as shit. You're just jealous.
No, you are, dude. I might just start hanging out with you now.
Hell yeah. You hear that?
Whatever. Y'all can go make out then. I don't care.
How about you make yourself useful and do the dishes or something while me and my new friend shoot the shit?
No.
Oh, well, I guess you're ready to move out then, aren't you?
No.
Well, then you better go do the damn dishes.
Yes, sir. Are you still living with your parents?
So, let's actually talk through this. So, it's very common, especially nowadays, to say like, hey, you're still living with your parents in your 20s, sometimes even in your 30s in some cases. But this is not something that should be frowned upon, in my opinion. The reason for that is because sometimes living with your parents may be the only way for you to actually be able to invest in something, whether it's the stock market, buying your own house. All of these aspects sometimes are specifically tied to how much money can you put away after you're paid. And in most cases, if you're living with your parents, it's a lot easier, to actually save money and put money aside than to actually, go out there, get your own place, or, buy your own place if you have that much money. Because essentially what you're doing is actually, you're just throwing money away. And this is just my honest opinion. The reason for that is because I myself have lived with my parents in my 20s. And, I actually used that opportunity, while I was living with my parents to actually have the ability to, buy my first place. So yeah, what you need to think about is, just because you live with your parents, while you're still in your 20s, doesn't mean that, you've failed. It just means that you're making a smart decision not to go out there and pay $2,000 to $3,000 for rent, or even have to live bundled with a bunch of roommates that, maybe you don't get along with. Potentially, it's really rough out there when you're starting off in your career and you don't have the ability to, not just save but also live a little bit freer. Sometimes, with the money that you make, you're living paycheck to paycheck, barely have the ability to, go out there, have a little bit of fun with your friends. And all these things add up to your mental health. Whether you're seeing yourself, comparing yourself to others, where you don't see that, you're investing properly, you're not having the life that you want to have. All of these aspects are important. And sometimes living with your parents is the sacrifice you need to make in order to actually pursue what you desire most. So let's move on to the next video. So this next video is from Marvin_Francois. Let's see what he has to say about debit cards.
Debit card. Take your debit card, cut it up. Get rid of it. You don't need it. If you have a credit card, just take all the ordinary expenses that you would put on a debit card and put it on a credit card. If you were going to put gas in your car, you were already going to do that anyway, right? Instead of putting it on a debit card that doesn't reward you for that spend, put it on a credit card and then immediately thereafter use the debit card to pay down the credit card. You're literally getting paid to spend money on things that you're already going to spend money for. Groceries, you're already going to buy them anyway, right? You got to eat or you're going to die. If you're going to buy those things, put it on a credit card that's going to reward you and cash back for that. You don't have to do anything outside of what you were already doing. Just transition those transactions over to your credit card and then use your debit card to pay the credit card down. It's very simple. If you have a...
So I'm gonna, this is where it's gonna be tricky. I am the proponent of like, hey, anything you can, put it on your credit card. But that's, you know what that does for you? It does two things. It increases your credit score, especially as you continue to pay off your credit card every month in full. And the second thing is you're going to be earning points on that puppy every time you actually do a credit card swipe. Depending on your credit card, it's actually going to give you sometimes even 2, 3, 4, 5% back for every single purchase. And so, oh, and by the way, we actually have a credit card video which we'll link down below. So if you guys want to see like the top 10 credit cards, which I recommend, we have that video for you guys. So the next thing I want to talk about is nowadays, a lot of businesses know this strategy where they're like, hey, a lot of people out there want to maximize, of course, their credit cards. They want to maximize their points. But the thing about it is, it's not always free. On the business side, actually, they have to pay something called a processing or a transaction fee. And usually it ranges between 2 to 5% depending on the credit card processor. And on top of that, and just to let you know, American Express is actually the one that charges the most transaction fees, sadly, to small businesses and other things. So a lot of times nowadays, a lot of businesses, especially like gas stations, they're actually going to charge you an upcharge. So sometimes gas stations will charge you 10% more per gallon for using credit, which will sometimes outweigh the 2 to 4% you'll be getting back from your credit card. And the other thing is, a lot of businesses are now charging at least a 3% surcharge, so you won't even be getting the most out of your credit card, because if you're only getting 2%, you're actually losing. So in these instances, I would myself actually use my debit card to avoid the 3% fee or whatever the fee is at the gas stations, because in the long run, I know that having that cash back is great, but in my wallet, it's not going to be so great because I'm actually paying more than the sticker price, if that makes sense. The other thing is, once you actually start owning properties and you actually have to pay property taxes online yourself, most online portals are actually going to charge you a crazy premium if you decide to use your credit card. So in this case, I would use my debit card or my checking account to pay it directly. So there's going to be instances where you need to weigh your options. Is paying with cash better, or is paying with credit better? You yourself need to weigh these options and figure out which is the most cost-effective way to pay for your purchase. So this will end our reaction with TikTok video, episode 12. I hope everyone out there has a blessed day, and adios. Keep doing what you're doing. You're doing an amazing job, and I'm wishing everyone out there all the best. All right, until next time, adios.